Darling one, you were born from the sweetest love, cast from the fires of creation, burning bright into the making of your perfect constellations. Head high, my love, never let them diminish you. Stand tall in the power of your love. Break open to the thousands come before you, written in your heart with holy blood. Keep going, my love. Hold tight to the scripture of your inheritance, your dreams born from ancient stone. Weave your magic star of wisdom, breathing life into hollow bones. Courage, my love. Place pain upon your sacred altars. Grow seeds where life has become hopeless. Lend hands to those who fall and falter. Let love be life's greatest opus. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Dreaming the Ancestors, a podcast where we talk about remembering and reclaiming ancestral stories, feminine wisdom, and earth magic. And today I'm so excited to welcome Eimear Burke to the podcast, who is a Druid and a Seanchaí, a storyteller, as well as the chosen chief of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, known as OBOD. And this is the 7th episode of the 2nd season, where we're focusing on uplifting Native Celtic voices. And we're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. A very warm welcome to everyone who's here live. Please feel free to say hello in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and bring on Emer now. Here she is. Yes. Hi, Emer. Thank you so much for being here with us. And maybe we could just begin by hearing just a few words about your work with OBOD and as a celebrant and all of the other beautiful things that you do.
Hi, Tara, and hi, everybody. It's just lovely to be here. And thank you for inviting me to be on your show. Okay, I suppose, I'm the chosen chief of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, as you've said, and I was installed 2 years ago online, which was a very strange event, given that we had planned that we would have a in-person ceremony in Glastonbury, where we usually have our summer gatherings. Anyway, but because of the pandemic, we couldn't. But it was a very, very moving experience for me. Prior to it's interesting, we're having this online. Prior to the pandemic, I would have said we can't have ceremonies online. We can't have ritual online. It doesn't have the same meaning. And when we knew we couldn't have the ceremony in person, that with conversations with Philip, my predecessor, and Stephanie, our scribe, and Dave, the bard, our Pendragon, around how we could have it so that it could be done on the inner world, and then how could the membership share in that. So anyway, we created this ceremony through sending each other recordings, etc. And I hadn't heard the completed one until it was happening and it was broadcast, or the recording was broadcast live. And I was sitting in the room next door, in my own home, and I could feel Philip passing that to me from his home in Lewis. And it was really, really profound. And I knew then this was how it was meant to be. Had it been physically, I'd have been distracted by the 600 people that are going to be surrounding us. And so much of our work as Druids is working on the inner plane. And if we can't do it on the inner, how can we actually manifest it on the outer? So that really brought home to me how we can have connection online. Now, it's no substitute for the real thing, I have to say, because we had, a few weeks back, we had our summer gathering in Glastonbury, and we had, as I was already installed, we had a confirmation ceremony of the installation. And that was just wonderful to be there physically. So it's been an interesting 2 years where I'm the head of an organization like this and not meeting anybody physically, and it's all through this medium. And this is my first time as a guest on StreamYard, although I use it myself as a host, and how wonderful it is and how we can connect with so many people. And for our order, it has My experience is going over to the UK about 4 times a year and then going to Italy and other places, meeting other druids. But for many of our members, there are solitary druids who've never met anybody, who are not in a seed group or not in a grove. And because we have now gone online and we have such a strong online presence now, that our community has broadened and people have that greater sense of connection to the order, which I would not have anticipated. So that's one good thing that has come out of this pandemic, that luckily we had the technology to support us in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I'm kind of waffling on. So
No, beautiful. I really love what you just shared. Yes, as people who are devoted to this path of really honoring these earth honoring traditions, it can feel a little bit strange to do our work online sometimes. But yeah, most of my work is also online, and I've had people reflect back to me, I never knew a ceremony could be so powerful online. And as you were saying, the energetic realms that we're dealing with really transcend time and space. And so it really opens us up to a much wider sense of community all across the world. And amazing that you and I can be sitting here, in you in Kilkenny and me in Colorado, and have this beautiful conversation. So thank you for your wisdom on that. Yeah, thank you so much. And speaking of energetic realms, I always like to open these conversations by really creating sacred space together and calling in the spirit of our ancestors and calling to the spirit of the land. So I'd like to just take a moment to guide us all into that experience. So for those of you who are listening, and Emer, for you and I as well, I invite us to just close our eyes for a moment and really imagine that we're having this conversation in the flesh, heart to heart, and we're gathered around a fire, around that fire that really is the pulse of life. Just as our ancestors have gathered around the fire for generations and generations, going all the way back to the very, very beginning. And to feel our connection in the circle around the fire. To feel that we're gathering in sacredness, in ceremony for this conversation. And I'd like to take this opportunity for us to call in our ancestors. This podcast is called Dreaming the Ancestors. And for me, it is so much about connecting to the wisdom of our ancestors and healing our ancestors through these meaningful conversations. So I would like to call in, welcome in all of my ancestors. I have mixed European ancestry, and I really, especially in this moment, want to call to the really ancient ancestors who lived so harmoniously with the earth. And I'm leaving a pause here because I can feel them so strongly. And I know that they have so much wisdom to share about how to be in right relationship with the earth, which is so, so needed in these times. And as I'm feeling them, I'm also feeling the lands of my ancestors. And I'm calling to the spirit of those lands, Ireland, England, Scotland, Italy, amongst others. And I'm also really feeling the presence of the lands that I'm on as well. The mountains of Colorado, and where I am are the ancestral lands of the Ute and Arapaho people. And I honor the ancestors here, and I honor the spirit of the land here as well. Welcome, welcome, ancestors, earth honoring ancestors of my blood and bone, and ancestors of this land. And with that, I will pass over to you, Emer.
You want me to continue honoring the ancestors? Okay. Eimear Sinsear. Sinsear Orlina Fulla. Sinsear Orlina Hullish. Sinsear Orlina Banya. Beeling in you agus fáilte rih de inspiráid agus de bhanachtaí ar an chlár seo. Fáilte rih de chosant agus de inspiráid agus de léirgas agus an fasalt. is say mor vahagaléir go raibh amhlaí. Sin é.
Blessed be, blessed be. Falcha to all of the ancestors, and thank you for bringing in the Gaelga. Okay, so gently opening our eyes, feeling ourselves connected in circle. I'd now like to just say a few words to introduce this episode today. So the title of this episode is Modern Day Druidry and Rites of Passage. And I'm so excited to dive into this discussion. And I'd actually like to begin with a quote by Elizabeth Gilbert, which I actually discovered on Emer's website and found it to be incredibly poignant and true. So she says, "We do spiritual ceremonies as human beings in order to create a safe, resting place for our most complicated feelings of joy or trauma, so that we don't have to haul those feelings around with us forever, weighing us down. We all need such places of ritual, safekeeping. And I do believe that if your culture or tradition doesn't have the specific ritual you are craving, then you are absolutely permitted to make up a ceremony of your own devising." End quote. In the Western world, I find that we can often lose track of our most important moments, the most important moments in our lives, transitional, transformational moments such as giving birth, menopause, divorce or breakups, marriage or commitment, death of a loved one, an important achievement, getting sober, menses, and so many other moments. We often don't give these rites of passage the true presence and meaning that they deserve. And so today we're going to be discussing how the earth-honoring pathway of Druidry can help us to uplift these moments, and especially how we can uplift them as modern women. We'll also be discussing some of the feminine aspects of Druidry and what it means to walk the Druidic path in the modern world, and how to create more meaning in our everyday lives through ritual and ceremony. So I'm going to pass over to Emer to share some of her beautiful wisdom, and I would love to just begin by hearing a little bit about your personal journey, how you became interested in Druidry and storytelling and the sacred feminine.
Thank you, Tara. Yeah, I being Irish and I come from a rural town in Ireland, and I was brought up as a Roman Catholic, and I came from a fairly conservative Roman Catholic background, and I was never religious. And I remember being in religion class at 9, and it just dawned on me that the God the nun was talking about didn't exist. And I panicked because I thought, I'm going to go straight to hell now for even thinking that. But I never had that sense of deity in the way it was taught to me as a child. And so I spent many, many years as an agnostic. And I went to Africa as a nurse in the early 80s, and I was interested in Indigenous healing. And I came back, and then I did a degree in psychology, and then I went back out to Africa again with my first husband. And I became, so during my years of agnosticism, I was very skeptical of most New Age stuff. So I had nurses are particularly, well, Irish nurses in those days, particularly superstitious. They were always getting their fortune told or going to a tarot reader, and I had no time for any of that nonsense. And I suppose I was very much wedded maybe in a kind of a rational world in some way. But when I went back to Africa again, I met people who thought differently. And I remember going, I was in Zimbabwe. I was living in Lesotho, but I was teaching or running a course in Zimbabwe. And I went with a friend of mine to this village, and we went to this traditional healer who did a reading. Now I went in and I thought, well, this is not my thing, but I'll go in. I was blown away by what he told me. And I began to meet other healers and people who were interested in meditation. I took up yoga and I joined a healing group. And that started me on a path of looking at having another way of viewing the world. And that was where I discovered about Glastonbury. I had never heard of Glastonbury before that. I was living in Lesotho. Heard about Findhorn. And so I was meeting all these different people from different nationalities and different backgrounds. And I was absolutely fascinated. And then I came back to Ireland and I did a master's in counselling psychology. Then I started working in a development studies centre because of my experience in Africa. And I was much more open. I knew when I went back in to do my master's, I'd become maybe a little bit more left-brained again. Going back to Africa again, I was beginning to reconnect with those traditions. And I met my second husband, Howard, and he was coming with me, and he wanted to do something while I was teaching on this course. So one of my students said his brother was a healer, and Howard had said he was interested in Indigenous healing. So they were introduced, and then Howard went off to him to spend some time with him for 3 days, living in his mud house while I was teaching. And Howard videoed his work working with his clients. Now, Howard was a psychiatrist, and we became close friends, Siobhan and I and Howard, and we worked with him. We would sit in on his sessions and looking at meeting points. Where does modern psychology, where does modern psychiatry and the way he worked, where did they meet? And we showed some of his work at conferences. And then he came and he spent 3 summers with us. And I had initiations with him. It was absolutely wonderful. And I had met an American woman who worked the native tradition. And I'd done a series of sweat lodges with her, and it was fascinating. I loved the nature connect, but it wasn't mine. And neither of those traditions came from my landscape. And that was one of my frustrations, even though they were very generous in terms of their teachings and welcoming into that, it wasn't mine. And I remember being with Siobhan, my Tanzanian healer friend. We were in a bookshop and this book popped out, and it was Cassandra Eason's The Modern Day Druidess. So I looked at it and I just skimmed it. And she says, you don't have to be deep in the forest to be a druid. You can be a druid in an apartment. If you have 4 pot plants, that can be your grove. What I loved about that was this is all practical. This is achievable. So I bought the book and I was blown away by it. And she's a solitary druid. And she mentioned Ovates at the back of the book and said she had done her training with them and highly recommended them. So I thought, well, I don't want to be in a group. I prefer to be on my own. So I went online, went on the website, and I had a choice. I was should professionally have done a training course in psychotherapy supervision. And that's what I should have been doing. And yet this was calling me and I knew I couldn't do both. So anyway, I decided to sign up for the introductory courses. And as soon as I did, this feeling just rushed up inside me and I knew that was the right thing to do. And then I did the introductory course and I thought, I have to join or I have to do this. So I remember there are 3 grades. There's a bardic, ovate, and a druid grade. You start off at the bardic grade. And as part of, so it's a by distance course, so it happens over the course of a year. And every month you'll get these courses, these lessons. And with it you'll get, or 8 times a year, you'll get a book, a ritual book for the corresponding festival and the wheel of the year. So I got mine in August, and that was just preparing me for the upcoming one, which would have been the autumn equinox. And Siobhan was with us and we were doing a workshop and we thought, well, I have this ritual. Why don't we do an equinox ritual? And we did. It was beautiful. And he said, you've been given a key. And he said, you need to use this. So you need to continue the wheel of the year, holding these ceremonies in your place. Otherwise, the lock will get rusty. And in a sense, I'd only joined the order. Like I felt like I was in 10 minutes. And here I was holding ceremonies for people. And that's 19 years ago. So this is our 19th cycle wheel of the year that we've done. And it blew me away because then I actually began to connect with my own landscape. So the teachings provided a scaffolding. There's no dogma within the order. So there's teachings that you have that you are free to engage with or not, meditation, practicums, etc. And then lots and lots of references. And it's all about your own engagement with them and with the landscape. And I found I had come home. And then after about 7 years, I started going to gatherings. So I actually gave up the solitary bit, which was never really true, although that's what I had thought myself, and found then a family within the order. So that's how I came to OBOD, if that makes any sense. So Howard and I set up a Druidry college here because we were asked, would we teach people? And I said, well, why not sign up for the order? It's by distance. And people said, no, they wanted a physical one. So I did for a number of years, and then once I knew I was taking over as chosen chief, I closed that down. So we've been holding, we have a grove here I live in a beautiful place that when I first came, it was just a field. And now we have no room to plant any more trees. It is full. And so I'm very, very lucky. I live in a rural area, close to a city, a small city, by US standards, of course. But I live in a magical place. It's full of history. So I've been very, very lucky to practice as a druid or live as a druid right here in my own home. I don't have to drive anywhere. That I live on a sacred site. My land is sacred.
Beautiful.
I'm waffling now, so I don't know if I've...
Yes, no, that was so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing, and so lovely to get a sense of how you came to this path. It's a question I always like to ask people because we all have different pathways to come to this shared place, this gathering of wisdom and tradition. So thank you so much for sharing that. And the next question I'd like to ask you is, what does it mean to you to be a druid? Like, what does that path look like for you? And especially as a modern woman, I'd really love to hear that.
Well, essentially, Druidry for me, is it's a nature-based spiritual path where we look to the seasons and the landscape as a metaphor for our lives. And we have an inner landscape that we develop and work on. And we also have, obviously, our outer landscape. And when there is a connection between our own inner landscape and that of the outer landscape, then there's that sense of harmony and balance in our lives. And we do that by following the wheel of the year. So we've just celebrated the summer solstice. And what I love about the order in Obad is that there's no dogma. So you are free to come from any tradition and combine that tradition with your Druidry. There's no list of sins. There's no list of commandments. However, we are encouraged to live from our own internal moral compass, that we take responsibility for our actions. Central to Druidry it's about being a path of service, a sense of responsibility for the earth and our beings, that sense of interconnectedness between ourselves and the whole planet. And it's not that we are at the top, but that it's not that we, like nature, we are nature. We are part of that web and don't have that sense of individuation from the rest of nature, but that we are part of it. And that we can be theistic or not, monotheistic, polytheistic, animistic, it doesn't matter. We don't fight over that. However, and it's that we come together in circle through a love of nature and honoring that in however that may be. So our service is different, many, many faces. You can be a bard, a storyteller, a poet, a singer. When I started, when I was in the bardic grade, Howard was a poet, my husband, and he could just spit out poetry, just flowed from him. And I found that very, very frustrating. I didn't have any of those skills. And I could tell jokes, but I didn't really value that. It wasn't until I finished that grade that I actually started telling stories. And then when I went to the next level, the Ovate one, which is more the healer, shamanic phase, and I have been interested in Reiki. I'm a psychologist, a herbalist, shamanic practitioner. All of those things I was doing while I should have been focusing on my bardic studies, but I found I'm not a poet, and yet I've discovered it through magic. It came after that, and I took up the harp on the next level. So some people act as healers, herbalists, diviners, astrologers. There's many, many ways. And then the Druid one is around, it's a philosophical strand. It's one of service, holding rites of passage, holding rituals. And yet, regardless of what stage you are on your path as a Druid, you can do any of those. It's a non-hierarchical organization, even though we talk about 3 grades. It's just that's the pathway you take. But you can do all of those things at any time on your path. So a modern day Druid, I suppose we don't know how our ancient ancestors as Druids practiced, because Druidry was essentially an oral tradition. We know from some accounts of the Roman writers and also the Irish monks here And obviously they would have been written through a very much a filtered lens, and they were telling their own story. So we don't know, sorry, I'm getting caught in wires here. We don't know how what the actual rituals entailed, but we do have enough from the stories to glean a certain spirituality. So we have the 4 fire festivals, although that's not named in the stories. Bealtaine, which is May, Luna, so August, and Samhain, which is November. And they would have been agricultural festivals that would have been very, very important. And they feature in the stories, not Imbolc for some reason. Although Bridget is honoured, and we know about Bridget, the goddess who morphed into being a saint. And then our pre-Celtic ancestors honoured the sun festivals, the solstices and the equinoxes. So the notion of a wheel of a year is a modern thing, and that came, between Gerald Gardner and Ross Nichols, who was the founder of modern Wicca in Britain, and Ross Nichols, who's the founder of OBOD. That it's a very nice synthesis of our. Well, I don't know if we're Celtic. It's not a word I'm particularly comfortable with, but our Irish past, and then our way that we have with the ancient monuments that tell us that these alignments were very, very important. So you put the together, and it makes sense for a modern world. So Druidry is a bit like that quote. If you haven't got a specific ritual from a particular event in your life, then you make up your own, as long as you don't claim that it's ancient. It doesn't have to be ancient to have validity. So Druidry is something that's evolving and growing to meet the needs of these times. So some people say to me, well, you have a bad history with all that human sacrifice you did. And it's like, well, the Romans gave a few accounts where they were not beyond crucifixion themselves. So I'm not too sure how much human sacrifice was practiced by Druids. Maybe there's human sacrifice happening now. The modern world, and it's sanctioned by governments. It's called war, or in modern, euphemistically, it's collateral damage. But we don't have to do that. But we can engage with nature like our ancestors did. We can engage with the earth, the sky, the sea, those 3 realms that were there then and valued, and we can do it now and make it relevant to our own lives. So I suppose it has ancient roots, as everything has. We have roots going way, way back. And it's about picking what we can from the stories and from the landscape, and allowing the landscape to speak ourselves, to tell us how we can be as modern Druids.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I really love engaging with these as living traditions, which is really what I was feeling coming through you, and the way that you expressed that was so alive. And these traditions live through us and in our own unique ways. And I loved hearing about earlier about how OBOD is such a non-dogmatic, non-hierarchical organization that really allows each person to live these traditions in their own way, and also honoring the wisdom from the past while making it relevant to the times that we live in. So thank you for that beautiful insight. And of course, you've stepped into such an important leadership role within OBOD in the past few years. And I know that many women were very excited to see a woman at the forefront of this organization. And I would love to hear a little bit about some of the feminine aspects of Druidry that really inspire you.
I find the question very strange, because my experience of OBOD has never been that it was a masculine path. And having grown up as a Roman Catholic, and how very much women were treated within Christianity, and very much that secondary position that you say there's no women priesthood, all of that, and the whole history that I won't go into, that I never felt I had a place as a woman within the Roman Church. And then joining the order and actually seeing that equality right there from the beginning. When Ross Nichols set up OBOD, so there's 3 people at the top. It's a very flat hierarchy. There's the chosen chief, there's the Pendragon, and who's the chief dragon, whose job is to, I suppose, protect the integrity of the order. And then there's the scribe, who protects the teachings of the order. So when Ross started, the scribe was a woman, and the Pendragon was a woman, and the chosen chief was a man. Then when Philip took over, the Pendragon was a man, the chosen chief was a man, and the scribe was a woman. And now you have Pendragon is a man, chosen chief is a woman, and the scribe is a woman. So you'll always have an even number of when you have three. But there's always been a place. So I was always struck when people say, well done, it's victory for feminism, etc., and all of that. And I thought, it never even occurred to me, because within the order, there was no discrimination. It was that place of ease, and the whole order was founded on equality. Where I think initially with the Druid revival in Britain, I think the three criteria, you need to be male, Christian, and a Freemason or something, that came from that tradition. But in terms of OBOD, its very, very beginning, it was one of balance between the two. So there's never been that struggle. And some people thought, well, you worked really hard to get that promotion. It's like, well, I didn't work for that at all. And someone said, you deserved it. And I go, no, I didn't deserve it. How I wasn't elected, I was chosen. It's still a bit of a mystery to me why I was. It was not something I'd ever aspired to. I mean, had the job been advertised, I would not have applied for it. It never occurred to me that I would be chosen chief. I always assumed Philip would be chief forever. I mean, that's not very rational and practical, but I could never envision. I never even had a thought to myself who would replace him. So it was a big shock to me when I was invited to be. I didn't want it at the beginning, and I thought, I'm not so sure really this is for me. Anyway, I had to give it a lot of thought, and I'm glad I did now, because people have been very, very supportive of me, and that's very, very important. That it's like I'm holding a space for the order. I'm the chosen chief, but I'm not controlling anybody. It's not a place of power; it's a position of responsibility. And the order has always worked. This is what I love about it: is if you have a gift and you can be of service to the order, great. It's a position of responsibility, not of power. So it works very, very well in that way. So I'm not too sure what the feminine aspects of Druidry, because if you look at one aspect, you go, well, is that masculine or feminine? And it's neither, it's both. So I'm afraid you're not going to get a good answer.
No, thank you so much for sharing. No, that's really beautiful. And yeah, so much on this podcast, we talk about feminine traditions and what have you. And I really love that your perspective is just, there isn't that differentiation necessarily. So yeah, thank you so much for bringing that forward. And
there's a rite of passage, particularly for women, but in terms of any of our ceremonies, as an order, one isn't more masculine than feminine. You see, people can be theistic and they can be duotheistic. So they say, well, I work with the goddess, I work with the goddess and the god. And that's for some people, but it's not, everybody is free to express that in their own way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. So speaking of rites of passage, I would really love to dive into that for the remaining of our call, really. And actually, really following on from what you just shared, I'd love to ask you, why are rites of passage important to women? What can they teach us about our feminine selves?
I think they're important for everybody, regardless of whether you're male or female. But as a woman, I suppose the purpose of any rite of passage is to mark a transition from one phase of your life into another. And I think our modern world has gotten rid of all rites of passage, regardless of whether you're male or female. And I think that is to our cost. I think it's very, very important to bring these back. Okay, say as a Roman Catholic, okay, there was the baptism, there was communion, and I did get married in a Catholic church. And then if you die, there's a funeral. And then there's also, before you die, there's a extreme unction that lasts. So there's 7 sacraments within Christianity, regardless of your gender. So I was aware of those, but a lot of them didn't have a particular meaning for me. One that's so having a meaningful rite of passage. So I'm a legal celebrant of pagan weddings here in Ireland, and so when I meet a couple, it's like, okay, here's a template that we can use to hit off, and you are free to have okay, I'm a druid, so this is how I work. But you can have whatever you want included in your ceremony, making it real for you. And people are very, very appreciative of that. And that gives a lot of, I suppose, a lot of agency to a couple for their wedding. Or if there's a baby naming, what do you want in this baby naming? Like, I mean, the purpose of a baby naming is to give the child a name, but also to welcome that baby into the community, however it's defined. And you allow a ceremony to bring the community, rather than as observers of the rite, that they are actually part of it. So I invite people to have people who give the baby or the couple an elemental blessing. Or say if it's a hand fasting, who's going to tie the cord? I'll ask the question. So to involve as many people as you can, so that they're not there as observers of ritual, but they are taking part in it. And that's why, say, as Druids, our ceremonies are held in circle, that we are all part of that. It creates a cauldron, it creates a container, that sacred space in which magic can occur. And magic does, and I mean, you can do the same rite of passage. It could be word for word, but it's different people, a different group of people, and it's a different experience. And again, it's a way to invoke spirit, however you define that. You can do that in a theistic way or an animistic way. We call in the four quarters. We can call in earth, sky, and sea. All of that creates that cauldron in which magic happens, transformation happens, because we have a ritual. We don't necessarily have an investment in the outcomes, because we don't know what that transformation is going to be. We don't know what the outcome of that ceremony will be for us. We can have, you and I can be in the same ritual, but my outcome is different to yours, and my experience of it is different. And that's what's so magical. And that we go in to the sacred space and there's a mystery. We have no idea what's going to unfold. You may call on the east, and we associate it here with the element of air. And so many times this has happened, and the birds just burst into song. Or there's a gust of wind, or you're facing the south, and you're talking about fire, and a spark jumps out of the central fire up into the air. How does that happen? Magic. You can't. It's like, this is how the earth speaks to us. And when we're together in sacred space and ceremony, those things happen. So those markers are really, really important for our lives. And because transition can be difficult. And we need to be able to mark transition from one period of our life into another. And I suppose we experience many deaths. And it's lovely to be able to say, okay, this is the death of this part of my life. This is over. And now I'm about to transition into a next phase. And if you can mark either the end of one with a ritual or the beginning of a new one with a ritual, how wonderful that is. And there's a sense of not so much closing chapters, but completing chapters, or having a sense of, I have fulfilled that piece and now I'm on to the next phase. I think one of the biggest regrets I don't have, but I would hate to have, is that I have an unlived life, and that so many things I have not fulfilled in my life. There will always be things I won't have completed, but to know that, yes, I've passed through that phase, that's that, and moving from one into the other. And I think rite of passage and rituals can do that for us.
Beautiful, yes. Wholeheartedly resonate.
Mm-hmm. To get back to the feminine pieces, there are ones around puberty. What does it mean to become a woman? And I remember when I first had my moon, I was in boarding school, and my reaction was, oh, great, I'm a woman now. But I don't know who I picked that up from. But I also had a lot of pain. So it was conflictual. And then there was all that shame stuff around bleeding and all of that. It was there in the ether. Nobody said it to me. But I remember there was an ad for pads years ago, the ones with wings, and outdo Mother Nature. And I remember being so angry. This isn't about outdoing Mother Nature. But then I read at 19, I read The Female Eunuch. And that book by Germaine Greer, just opened up a different world and a different celebration of what it meant to be a woman, and to have a moon, and to honor the sacredness of all of that. And I don't know if at 12 I would have been open to having a rite of passage. My daughter didn't want one when her time came. And I would have loved to have done that, but she did not want that. So I had to respect it. One rite of passage that I think gets taken from women that really, really saddens me, and this is because of modern obstetrics, is childbirth. The profoundest one for me was giving birth in this room, just behind me, in a birthing pool, to my second child. My son was born, and I'd hoped to have a home birth, but I ran out of steam, and I ended up having to go to hospital and having a cesarean section. But at 42, I had my daughter in here. And that was so profound, because that tested me. It tested my endurance, my courage, my stamina, both physically, psychologically, spiritually. And I pushed her out, having not succeeded the first time. That was the biggest challenge I have ever overcome. And nothing has ever come near that. And I knew, if I can do that, I can do anything. And that's when I really, really stepped into my power. And that was at 42. That wasn't as a young woman. Where all the messages were, between 16 and 25 is the ideal time to have a baby. I was absolutely no fit state to have. That was me, not mature enough. So that was a really, really profound experience for me.
So beautiful. Yeah, we actually, on the last podcast episode, we had such a deep conversation about that transition and motherhood. And yeah, for those of you listening, I highly encourage you to maybe even listen to that one after this conversation. It was so powerful. And yes, that I have not given birth. I've not been a mother yet, maybe someday, but yeah, I can feel what you're saying. Like, there's something in my DNA memory that remembers that rite of passage and how important it was, and reclaiming that passage for ourselves as women feels so important. And leading on from this conversation, I'd love to hear about what kinds of rituals or traditions, or even just concepts from the Druidic path can inspire and support these rites of passage.
Well, we have a framework for ritual, which is there, so then you can apply that to anything. You create your own rite. And individual druids do their own rites for rites of passage. One we did one for my daughter was when she was 8, because our kids didn't go to school; they were home educated. But, she had friends who made their communion, the idea, the Roman Catholic idea that you reach the age of reason by the time you're 7, and then you can receive your communion. And it's culturally, it's a big, big thing here. And so girls are dressed up as little brides in white dresses, and anyway, it's a thing. And we wanted to mark something for Quaylen, for her, and we called it an Age of Reason ceremony. And she had 2 friends who accompanied her. She needed a support group as well, because she wouldn't do it on her own. But anyway, there were 2 girls who did it with her. And it was absolutely beautiful. We had 2 fires, and one represented her early childhood. And then she put something into the fire that represented what she was leaving behind, comes through the fire, and then puts into the new fire, the second fire, what she's heading towards in the second phase of her childhood. And it was a really, really profound experience. And then we had people around her community offering her gifts, as in of their own, as in the gift of courage or blessings. And that was a really, really beautiful ceremony. So it marked that for her, going from that transition from early childhood to older childhood. We haven't done a similar, she's 20 now, but she hasn't been interested. So we have to leave that one. But so I had a croning one when I was 50. I decided I was a baby crone then. And that was a beautiful ceremony. Again, it involved, so it was always elemental blessings from each of the 4 elements. And I had a few women with me, and then chose candles, one to represent each decade of my life. And I spoke, as I lit each candle, what that decade meant to me. And right up, and then I had one for the decades going ahead. Again, that was honoring that and being able to leave behind stuff. Honoring the pain, honoring the triumph, honoring all the successes, all the achievements, as well as the losses, moving into the next phase. And again, it was always that acknowledging what's gone before, what have I now, where am I now, and where am I heading towards? So, and as well as hand fastings.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did my husband's funeral. Well, he and I prepared it. Obviously, this is not for women, but it can be for anybody. And we had two Druid friends, Paul and Koch, who held a ceremony for us. And that was beautiful. The two of us spoke about that because we'd always spoken about death and what we wanted for our funerals. So we had a funeral in the garden there for him. Again, elemental blessings and people, again, in that circle, people allowed to speak and share their grief and celebrate Hard's life and talk about memories, and all of that was really, really important. Again, it wasn't one person in charge, it was a community. It's always that circle, that container, that you have these rites of passage within your community, be it a circle of women or a circle of men or your immediately your family or whoever. That is really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love the community aspect of these rites of passage. And of course, they can be done, on our own and in our own sort of intimate space just with ourselves. But the community aspect really adds another layer to it. And something I've been just thinking about so much recently with all of the different challenges that we're faced with. And there's been a lot of really intense things happening here in the United States. And I've just been longing so much for that sense of community and circle, where, the circle really holds all different perspectives. It holds polarity. It holds everything. And it just feels so, the energy of the circle feels so healing, and for the times that we live in, which here in the United States, and I'm sure elsewhere as well, are becoming increasingly polarized. And I find that incredibly exhausting, challenging, and coming together for these important moments in our lives, to come together in circle, really reminds us that we have more shared, our shared humanity really shows up in the circle, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I really love that aspect. And I think the sense of kinship, also beyond our human selves, is something that comes up so much in Druidry, is feeling connected to the web of life that we belong to. And you spoke so beautifully about, in the ritual, when you're calling in the energy of the fire, and the fire, speaks, it shows up, and it really has that resonance. And there's that sympathetic magic that can happen too. I would love to maybe explore a little bit deeper in the last few minutes here, how we can weave ourselves into that sense of kinship and community through ritual, through ceremony, just in our everyday lives, going beyond here, those moments of significance, that those rites of passage, and just how do we live a life that's ceremonial, that connects us. I'd love to just sort of explore that. Yeah.
Well, I think you can start with two people. It's like, you may, I'm conscious that people, I'm very, very lucky. I have a community. We started off with 3, and now I don't know how many people. It's a very fluid one. And it's not just Druids, it's people who resonate with our ceremonies. And, but it started off with myself and Howard and one other person. And it can be that small. And I think, yes, you can do ceremony on your own, but we're talking about community and kinship. And I think that's that reaching out. That can be hard depending where you live. You can do it online, which can be really, really helpful. And I know, because we now have online ceremonies in the order, or physically. You only need to, if you can at least have that, and you set out, and it can be as formal or as informal. You start off, you don't need to be word perfect. I remember when I started, it was a Samhain ceremony. I remember I had my ritual, because I I was too nervous. I had everything written down. And then the rain came and the wind, and the rain washed the ink off the page. And I didn't know my east from my west. And I thought, what am I doing? And I was, getting caught up in getting this right. And it's like, no, just where, this is to quote Jesus Christ, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in their midst. But that applies to spirit, where 2 or 3 are gathered in the name of nature, in the name of community, in the name of spirit. It is there. And that even starting with that and saying, well, what do we want? What does a ritual look like for us? For some, it can be just lighting a candle. For some, it might be taking 3 breaths. It might be just holding hands. And it could be as simple or as complex as you like. And obviously, sometimes simplicity is incredibly powerful. And then you're not getting caught up in the choreography. It's just that, why are we here? Sharing this moment together as with our eyes closed, holding hands, taking 3 breaths, or whatever it is. That's how simple it is. And then gradually, as you get more confident, you may want to put more words and more complexity and weave more things in. But it starts off with the simple, if 2 of you can stand in a circle, will you create a circle by holding hands? But it's that's how it starts. And one thing about the community is the witnessing of the other. So if there's somebody there, they can witness your experience likewise. And then if there's a bigger community, they witness that transition for whatever it is that you're marking.
Yes, I love that so much. The witnessing, for me, so much of the ancestral work that I do and work that I do with others is so much about witnessing, honoring, just acknowledgement, how much healing can come just from acknowledging. And that feels so important in regards to connecting us with the wider landscape of how we belong in this world as well. So as you were sharing earlier, you acknowledged the flight of birds when you called in the spirit of the air. If you hadn't witnessed and acknowledged that, then the meaning wouldn't be there, right? So I think that acknowledgement and really being present and noticing can be so connective. And one of my favorite things to do when I'm in circles of women in person is to gaze into each other's eyes. And it can be so uncomfortable for people to literally just sit there and look each other in the eyes for a long period of time, saying nothing. And some of the most profound experiences I've had with women, and because I mostly do women's work and women's circles, but it can be with anyone, is that real gazing and that seeing and acknowledgement of each other just through looking into each other's eyes. That just came to me as you were sharing as well. Yes. Wow. Thank you so much, Emer, for this conversation. We just have a couple minutes left, and I'd love to just offer you a space to share anything else that feels alive for you in this moment, I suppose. It can be anything at all.
Well, I have here a lorica, and what a lorica is, a lurok is the old Irish word. It's a prayer of protection, and this is a Christian one, but it is believed to have been adapted from an older druidic blessing. So I thought I'd like to share this with you, if this is okay. So, I summon the 7 daughters of the sea, who shape the threads of long life. 3 deaths be taken from me, 3 lives be given to me. 7 waves of plenty be poured for me. May ghosts not injure me on my journey, in my radiant breastplate without stain. May my name not be pledged in vain. May death not come to me until I am old. I call upon my silver champion, who has not died and will not die. May time be granted to me of the quality of bronze. May my form be exalted. May my strength be increased. May my tomb not be readied. May I not die on my journey. May my return be ensured to me. May the 2-headed serpent not attack me, nor the hard grey worm, nor the senseless beetle. May no thief attack me, nor a company of women, nor a company of warriors. May I have increase of time from the King of all. I call upon Shenach of the 7 lives, whom fairy women suckled on the breasts of good fortune. May my 7 candles not be quenched. I am an invisible fortress. I am an unshakable cliff. I am a precious stone. I am the symbol of 7 riches. May I be the woman or man of hundreds of possessions, hundreds of years, each 100 after the other. I summon my good fortune to me. May the grace of Great Spirit be upon me.
Thank you so much. Such a beautiful invocation. I felt that's in my heart just so deeply. I've actually been looking at some ancient poems from Ireland this week and did not come across that one, and just found it to be incredibly moving. So thank you. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
So that's probably 8th century, or that is written down, but obviously believed to be much older.
Mm-hmm. It's incredible how these writings have come down to us through the ages and still can speak to us with that same sense of spirit and wonder as it did thousands of years ago. It just always amazes me. So Emer, this feels like a good moment to complete our conversation. And I wonder if there's anything you'd like to share about where people can find you online, anything that you offer that you'd like to know about.
Okay, so certainly with my own website is kilkennydruidry.com. And then there's druidry.org, which is the website for the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. I have Eimear Burke, Druid and Seanchaí, which is on Facebook, and I'm also on Instagram. Although I've been cancelled recently twice on Instagram, so I'm hoping this 3rd time. I just set it up a 3rd time about 2 weeks ago. Hopefully it'll still go. So Eimear Burke, I think it's called Druid on Instagram.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really encourage everyone to connect with Emer in those ways. And yeah, thank you just so much for your presence, for your wisdom today, Emer. And I'm just going to close my eyes here for a moment and just really honor the ancestors that we called in at the beginning of this conversation. And I can feel the richness in this circle of everyone who's been listening, and our connection around the fire, really honoring this beautiful space that we've shared today. So thank you. And for those of you listening, I very much invite you to join the Dreaming the Ancestors Facebook group if you're not part of this community. And please feel free to let us know what your biggest takeaway was from this episode. So thank you everyone so much. Thank you, Emer. Bright blessings to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Lovely to meet you. And thank you all for
Yes,
watching this.